Welcome to On the X. This episode kicks off a new recurring segment we're calling Mind Matters. It's an ongoing conversation about mental health and fitness between Jeff Wiedenhofer and me. Jeff is a retired Navy helicopter pilot, a former Broadway musician, and now a counselor at the VA, where he works directly with veterans navigating trauma, transition, and healing. He's also one of my closest friends, which makes this series all the more personal. Mental fitness is a topic that matters deeply to both of us. For me, it's a story I've lived, coming out of the military, struggling, doing the work, and learning just how much the mind affects everything else. For Jeff, it's the work he does every day. We bring different perspectives, but we care about the same thing, having honest, real conversations that might help others feel a little less alone. These episodes won't be scripted or polished. They'll be raw, candid, and maybe even a little uncomfortable at times. But they'll be rooted in experience and in the belief that mental fitness is something you can train. Today, we're focused on the topic of the emotional spectrum. So here we go with Mind Matters on the X. You and I have known each other for over 30 years at this point. You're one of my closest friends. And like I said, we both kind of got very interested in the mental health side of things, if that's the right way to put it. Very interested in that. I think both through our own kind of personal journeys, which were different in certain ways. And I've gone the route of just kind of like putting out content on it and doing things like that and having formulating my own opinion about how this stuff should be approached. You have gone the route of being licensed and actually talking. Yeah. So just so we're clear, just explain to everybody a little bit of your background there, and then what you're doing now, like where you're doing it, the type of people you see, and like your credentials on it.
Navy helicopter pilot for 9 years, from 97 to 06 on active duty, and then did another 11 on the reserves. 4 deployments to the Middle East. That's sort of the military credentials. I think a lot of people who've served in the military can kind of make a lot of assumptions about what that looked like and how that goes. But I got into mental health. I started getting into this 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago. And like you said, personal journey. And I like what you said. You've kind of taken this. You've wanted to get some public discussions going, maybe. I do too. But the work I'm doing is I've gone behind closed doors as a psychotherapist with individuals. So I work now for Department of Veteran Affairs. And before I go any further, I got to say, this is all just me here. This is all my opinions and my experiences. The VA did not send me here. This is my choice to come here and share my own experiences. But I work as a readjustment counselor. And I want to talk just a second, because I imagine there's a lot of people who listen to this who are getting some kind of care in the VA or have before. So I work for a vet center, and the vet centers are this separate counseling wing of the VA health system. You know, in the VA health system, for people who don't know, you can get all kinds of medical care, and medication and referrals and surgeries. But what the vet centers do, we're a completely separate side entity of the Veterans Health Administration, and we only do talk therapy counseling. So not the title, but the word that's used for the work I do is psychotherapist. And this kind of leads right into the discussion of what I think would be a good thing to talk about here, because I work with veterans, but not just combat veterans. I work for people who served and maybe did deployments, some who didn't. I work with people who experienced sexual assault, sexual trauma in the military. I also work with a lot of active duty. The vet centers are this kind of just place for anything where counseling services are needed. And it's a pretty robust system, actually. And I work at one in San Diego. And one of my coworkers has said several times recently that San Diego has the highest concentration of not only active duty, but also veterans in the area.
Right. Sure.
So you can imagine that we have new people coming through every week. The caseload is high. The work we're doing is real serious. It is not light counseling. It is not, and I've done some counseling outside. I told you about that when we talked previously. Yeah. But It's not some people coming in and saying, "Hey, I'm having a hard time finishing this job application, and I really wish I could get to the gym more often and make look better so my girlfriend will like me." Those discussions are part of a lot of the sessions we do, but we also get into the really deepest of the deep emotional pain daily.
So a couple things just real quick. So I just want to make sure you're an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker, right?
Correct.
And then you said your title is a readjustment counselor. Is that right?
That's what my work title is. That's what goes on the signature.
What does that mean, though? What are you readjusting to?
Good question. The Department of Veteran Affairs is set up to help people who did serve and to help continuing their care throughout their life.
Yep.
So with mental health, it's the main mission is to take traumas that happened, intense experiences that happened, events and interactions that affected all us while we served, and help us deal with it now that we're out. Which makes and it kind of makes it's a good title, I think, actually, because for active duty people, they're still in and they might deploy. So the readjustment is not necessarily appropriate for somebody who works in DoD counseling.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So does it mean basically like readjustment to civilian life, essentially? Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
That is primarily the mission. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So look, anybody I talk to on this podcast, it's good to get some background just so everyone kind of has a concept of where you come from. So you talked about the military stuff. You're also, it's worth saying, you were also a very accomplished musician, Broadway musician for what, a decade, something like that?
Yeah. 10 years in New York. Right. Those 11 years in the reserves, I didn't say what I was doing with most of my time. And that was in New York City, being a musician, and got into Broadway shows and guitar playing, all different styles, and really just having a blast. Yeah. But, it's a tough industry, business to keep rolling, to find financial security, much less success in. So that's kind of that, and COVID brought about a change that at the time was not that welcome, but I'm really glad it happened now.
And why? Okay. And obviously we could go down a huge thing of just on music, but that's not the focus here. But why this though? Because like I said, for me, as you know, I went through a whole decade of kind of mental health issues and chronic illness and all this stuff, right? That I'm very public about, because I think it's important. I really think it's important that we give people license to talk about this kind of thing and feel okay talking about it. They don't have to post it on Instagram like I'm comfortable doing, but I think that that's really important. And so I've tried to do my best to espouse that and do it myself, right? So other people could do that. But I didn't want to go, my path took me a different direction, but it was all based on personal experience for me. It was what I went through and what I knew obviously that there were other guys going through something similar. What was it for you? Was there a personal thing that put you on this path? Was it interaction with other people? What was it?
So I would say this too. I would say going back to, we could go back to service too. Like when we both first did our little boot camp thing back in the day, and there's always this aspect of service that seemed to be important and meaningful. And I'd say for me, and I appreciate you asking the question, because even as a musician, that was really important to me. Like more important than getting my name on some list of musicians who performed. That's always cool, but when you can do a performance in a show and it's meaning for people, and you can see faces and you can see emotional reactions and you're experiencing music together, it's just the most beautiful feeling. It's really because it's healing and it's uplifting, and it's all these things that we all know, we all get with music and why we engage entertainment. I think that was a big part of it. It's like, what can I do that's going to be meaningful to me? My wife has worked with victims for a long time, and I see the work
as
she
a
does.
Lawyer, right?
Yes, as an attorney. Yeah,
as an attorney. Yeah,
started in New York City as a assistant district attorney, a prosecutor there, and she's still doing that work now. Similar work, and I don't know. It's just, at the time also, this goes back to something you said earlier. I think, you and I are the same age, and it was like mid 40s was an important part. For me, I look at it like it's kind of a 5-year span in there where self-awareness suddenly
Totally.
became really important. Um, you and I both had kids close in age, and once they become more than just infants and toddlers and they start thinking for themselves, for me, that was a huge change in like, wait a second, I need to nurture this person in a different way. It's not just sticking a bottle in their face and throw them in a stroller. Like these are real interactions, and this person might become an adult someday. So that was important to me. Yeah, I was going through some stuff. The loss of music career was really hard on me. And I sought a little bit of help there too, and started to see counseling, what it was, what it looked like. I also did some research and was like, this is a growing job
Yeah.
market, and coming from freelancing for so long to something secure and steady was a real
Yeah.
benefit for me too. And it's like this could be meaningful and steady, and could be a lot of different things, and I can kind of help people in a lot of different ways.
So let me ask you a couple questions about just the trends overall. And I think the way I want to go with this
Mm.
series is, we talked a little bit beforehand, is to try to delve into a topic as best as we can, keep it on a specific topic around mental health, what I would call mental fitness, and stick on that for an episode, and then try to go, stay on point though, on target for these, because obviously we could go down 100 different rabbit holes on various things. But let me ask you kind of like a setup question before we get into that, which is, you mentioned how it's a growing field, which totally makes sense to me. But at the same time, like you were saying, there seems to be more awareness about it, right? Like I feel like I reflect on this a
Yeah.
lot. When I was growing up, like mental health was not a thing. It just wasn't a thing. If someone had
Nope.
mental health problems, they were like crazy, considered crazy, basically. Like if that came up in conversation, it was like they had real problems, right? Or at least that was the perception, right? Whatever that means. I don't even know what that means exactly. But nobody did any, as far as I know, no one I grew up with, not my parents, none of their friends meditated, did breath work, like maybe some of them had a diary or something like that, but nobody did any of that stuff. Like it wasn't even,
Yeah.
I don't remember ever hearing anything about meditation growing up, right? And it's only really come into the picture for me in the last, and certainly not through the military either. Like that wasn't a thing anybody did. It's only come into the picture for me in probably the last decade, I would say, close to that. And it feels like that's kind of culturally true as well. Like it's part of the zeitgeist now. But it's also, what's funny about it is none of it's new either. This stuff's been around for thousands of years. I mean, this is part of the tenets of Buddhism and
Yeah.
Stoicism, and like, all of these traditional philosophies and cultures that have this. And we still so many people just don't even know about it or don't do anything about it. The question I want to ask though there is, like, it seems to me like, why is there a simultaneous growing awareness and growing need, right? Like it almost seems like those would kind of cancel each other out somehow instead of simultaneously growing.
I don't know how to. Yeah, that's interesting question. I think what we're all realizing is the extent and the depth of what our needs really are.
Mm.
And let's just be real clear: our generation, and certainly the generations older than us, got very little information on how to process, how to be aware, and how to use that awareness
Yeah.
to help relationships, to help my daily activities, to help me sleep, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And I think you're onto something. I think our culture is many different things, but a lot of aspects of our culture, we're just still not good at finding, and I'll just leave it at this, healthy approaches to living and interacting.
Yeah.
It's a really evasive thing. It's hard for people to find it.
Yeah. I just wonder with those trends too. I wonder if it could be construed as more problems, even despite more awareness, but it also could be more people are willing to talk about it than before, right? So there's not actually more issues out there. It's just that people are open about it now in a way that they weren't before.
Yeah, this stuff was always there. I think that's what the topic I'm bringing today, and like every topic that comes up in a session it's not new to 2025. It was happening, 6,000 years ago with people.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I don't think any of this stuff is new. So let's get into this, and I want this to be kind of based off of. I think this can be helpful in a bunch of ways. I think it can be helpful in the sense that obviously our foundation supports veterans and active duty and families and everything. And so there's a lot of what you do within the VA that's directly applicable to the community that we serve. I also think it's important for just shedding a light on some of that for the people that support us, that are not part of the military, but they hear a lot about like mental health and PTSD and, TBI, whatever is going on, but they probably don't have a lot of specifics on that. They get stats, they get sound bites, they get other bullets, whatever. And then obviously there's people out there that are not members of the military, but we all have similar struggles. We may not have been exposed to exactly the same thing. People may not have been in combat, but they've been through some kind of trauma or whatever it may be. And so I think that it has broad applicability there. But I wanted to put it on you of like, where do we start? What's a theme within your work that you see a lot of that you think is worth diving into?
Yeah, I typed some stuff out and I came across this phrase I think works, and it sounds very intellectual, which is actually what I'm kind of trying to rail against here. But it's increasing our emotional spectrum, and it's finding balance, I think, and it starts with I wonder about the word psychology and psychological and research and psychologist a lot, and because as I engage content, podcasts, articles, studies, I keep seeing how easy it is to intellectualize psychology. And in my mind, this is from my anecdotal experience, but sometimes I feel like the word psychology has a lot more to do with our intellect and our cognitive experiences than our emotional experiences. Do you, am I speaking something true to your world too?
Yeah. So break this. This is I love this. So break this out a little bit, because this is something I talked to a guy, Connor Beaton, on this podcast. Do you know him?
Yeah.
Do you know who he is?
No, I saw that. I ran through and saw the topic just now though.
Yeah. So he wrote a book called Men's Work, and he works as he's not a therapist, but he's a coach, right? Like a mental health kind of coach with men specifically. And his work is geared towards men. So I thought his book was fantastic. And I told him it was the hardest book I've ever had to read, not because it was hard to understand, not because it was poorly written, but because like the amount of introspection it made me do was really challenging. And it's like so much work that you can get out of it. So, I thought it was a fantastic book, but this is something that I've had to come to terms with, which is I'm a very intellectual kind of person, right? Like I'm very cerebral and I'm up in my head a lot.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are.
Yep.
But his point that he was making was that's half the information. And he was basically saying your thoughts are the information of your mind. And this is your point. Like a lot of we think psychology, we think head, he's like, but your emotions are the language. I think he said, your thoughts are the language of your mind. Your emotions are the language of your body. And it's half the information. He's like, so if you are making decisions and doing things on analyzing and empirical data, and he's like, you're missing, especially internal work, right? You're missing half the information. And I just thought that was such a great way to frame it. I love that idea. And the
Yeah.
longer I've gone with this, the more I just find it's true. These things like, anxiety for me, Russell Kennedy talks about this. It's like, it's in your body. It's not in your head. He's like, it's an alarm system. That's like, it's, it's generated from your limbic system and everything, but like what you're feeling is it's emotional, right? And you can't think your way out of that. So is that
I think what you're onto is what we're all asking for help with when we go to therapy or to see friends or whoever's in our life just to help us. We're not dealing with intellectual pain. It's emotional suffering, whether it's fear, whether it's sadness or it's grief or it's, all the whole emotional wheel, right?
Yeah.
And this is why people come to my office. And I guess this topic has become really important to me in a lot of sessions because I work with a lot of people who saw some very, serious, severe combat. I also work with a lot of people who were sexually assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we just sit around, we don't worry about our ideas. We're not suffering from ideas and data. We're suffering from the emotional experience of it. And so on one hand, it's like, I kind of want to push back against the way psychology and psychological, the profession has gone, where there's so much logic and intellectualism in that approach to it. It's important to me too. I'm similar. But I know in all my relationships, data doesn't matter. What I read in a study does not matter. What matters is how I feel as I go through life, at this point where you and I are at middle age, kids getting older, been in relationships for a long time, which does not mean that everything went easy. That means we've gone through some stages and some things we had to address. All that suffering, that's getting through that in a healthy way is really what's important to so many of us.
And so, by the way, is this men and women that have this kind of? So what would you call it when they're coming in? Are they emotionally, would you call it dysregulated? Yeah. Are they emotionally closed off?
That's one. Yeah. A severe, an intense experience that, I'll use the word very, very carefully here, penetrates our safety. Whatever that is, whether it's perceived or actual, things happen to our body that are unsafe and break open our sense of security, are so emotionally painful and so go against so many expectations and hopes that we had for life. So there's the way that humans react to that kind of thing, which is maybe some of the most intense kind of trauma we could talk about, a sexual assault. Our bodies react in all kinds of ways to avoid further discomfort. That means repressing emotions and trying to hold it down. But as you and I know that we can do that for a period. And the word compartmentalization is one word I want to bring up today. But eventually things come back to us. Like I've heard you say, emotional pain is energy, and it does not just go away. 100%. It remains in us in different parts of our body and our experiences. But also humans can become very flat, where it's almost like people's subconscious is taking over and saying, we are going to minimize this emotional experience to this very thin thread. Because if we go outside of that, way too much stuff is coming in. It is too much emotional pain. And now the dysregulation happens. And that can look like all kinds of things. I'm sure every human who's been around for a while has seen that. When we're in emotional pain, we react and overreact. So that's really that's an important part too. That narrowing of the emotional experience to just, I've seen it flat. I've seen it really depressed and down, stuck down there. And then there's also this word mania or manic episodes that people have sometimes too, where it's just, if you graph the emotion and the energy level and the tension, it's just stuck. It's flatlined way up high.
On the X is brought to you by Mechanics Wear. Mechanics Wear gloves are kind of the go-to glove, I think, for most people out there, whether it's working around the house or on the job or some kind of tactical setting. That's certainly been the case for me throughout my life. And they've made a whole bunch of improvements to the gloves that they have out there. So they've got the kind of original series here with the Velcro backing, Velcro close that most people can use in sort of everyday settings, very ubiquitous for various things that you might want to do. Then they've got these fast fit ones, which you essentially just slide on. There's a little loop there around the wrist where you can pull them on. And then they've got the Impact series, which has a reinforced backing to protect your knuckles. And then they've got this lock ring reinforcement around the thumb now, where there's a lot of wear and tear. There's a whole bunch of other improvements to these. And if you go to their website, they literally have a 5 to 7 minute video about each one of these sets of gloves and all the improvements they've made, from the material, reducing the seams, making them more reinforced, making them more moisture wicking. It's clear that they put a lot of care and attention into their gloves. And if you listen to the guy talk on the website, they really love gloves. And I think that that comes out in everything they do. When I'm going out to a hardware store and I'm looking for some gloves, I almost look at everything else as just kind of a cheap knockoff. So definitely my go-to glove, highly recommended. Mechanicswear gloves, they're available at most retailers on mechanicswear.com and GSA Advantage, and they're proud to offer an exclusive 15% off discount through the ID.me program to military veterans and first responders. So check them out. Well, let me talk about my experience in this, because I'm curious if this is right. My experience was I had a lot of suppressed anger and sadness, right? Like when I think of suppressed emotions, my experience has been that's what people suppress for the most part. It's those two things. There's a fear component, but I look at that slightly differently. That's my interpretation. But I didn't know it was there. I didn't know it was suppressed in me, so to speak. It was like I just had spent 20 years just kind of stuffing everything inside. We've talked about this before. This is the holding in a fart analogy. Just like keep it in, super toxic, right? Like you just can't do that. And it's going to come out in some way. Like it's going to, like your body is trying to get rid of this energy, and it's going to lead to dysfunction in some. And that's what was going on with me. But I had no clue about that, completely oblivious to it, until I did some things where I felt the amount of emotional energy that I was storing, and it like blasted out of me, basically. I mean, for hours, right? Of just like emotional catharsis.
I would use the word expression. You experienced a really intense expression of all this
stuff. So my
question
question there is that's what's going on with most people? Do they know it? Are they just completely oblivious to the fact that they like, and do they know where it comes from too? Because I think that's the other piece of it, is a lot of people, some people know, right? Like I think I actually had a good sense of where, even though I didn't know what was going on at the beginning, once I kind of figured it out, like I pretty much knew where the source of that for me. But some people don't. Some people have this kind of thing that comes from childhood where they can't even remember some of these things, right? Or maybe they do, but it's so painful to even bring it up that it's like they don't even know how to deal with it. So go ahead.
And I want to pause right there. It's just, when you say it's so painful, we're talking about both perceived emotions and subconscious pain too. And it's a really interesting thing to think about sometimes, how, like you said, you didn't even necessarily know or understand that you were in pain, or how much certainly you were in pain. This is the brain working on emotions, right? And everything we're talking about here, I want to say this too. Everything we're talking about here is very abstract. It is hard to put this into textbook, step-by-step terminology, problem solution. And I try to talk about this with everyone who comes into the office. You know, if we have pain in our ankle, a picture is going to be taken, and you can see the bone or the tissue. You can see the break or the tear or the damage. And somebody else comes in and tries to do a process that's going to facilitate healing. And then over time, we take more pictures and we can measure the distance, and the bone is starting to shrink and come down to zero. And you can see the tissue, it's starting to, expand, and the muscle looks better. And that's how we measure physical pain. there's just no way to measure this stuff. So we have to talk in metaphors. We have to talk in the abstract. And I just want to introduce that to anybody who's listening, who's just, if this is new to them, like that's where this is, and that is how it has to be.
And this is why I always talk about, this is why I think it's so important when I talk about this thing to define the mind, because I think getting back to your sort of empiricism there, these days there's a lot of focus on brain health, and it gets back to that sort of like data stuff.
Yeah.
And that's important. Absolutely valid that we need to look at that. But I'm a big proponent of your brain is not your mind. Your brain is an organ in your body. Your mind is, we think anyway, somehow a byproduct of that. It's at least tied to it somehow. We're not 100% sure. But it's an energy, right? Yeah. And so the reason it's so hard, exactly what you're saying, like point to this, put your finger on it, measure it somehow, is because it's an energetic health. Yeah. It's not a material health. And that's really important to realize. And that, I think then when you think of it that way, that was what made it, I guess, really clear for me of like how important the emotional component is, right? Because if your emotions are dysregulated, your energetic health, which is your mind, like that's a part of it, right, can't be functioning correctly, right? Like it's off. Yeah. Like it's just not operating properly.
Yeah. And this goes back to what you're saying here, I think goes back to one of the things I introduced earlier, which is the problem with keeping the concept of psychology limited to just intellectualism.
Yeah.
And you know, when you read that book, I guess it sounded like it struck you to consider yourself like, I might be 50%. I've seen that in other books too, where we are half intellectual, cognitive, and we are half emotional beings. That's a lot, you know. And this gets into, we can relate this now to the military experience and the concepts of or outside the military too, ambition, the word resilience, which I'm starting to have similar to psychology, I'm starting to have a problem with this word.
I'm with you on this too. I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I feel this way too.
Well, and I'm going to add a third one, toughness, ambition, resilience.
Oh, totally. Oh, don't even get me started on toughness. Yeah.
Now, we have to start the conversation saying these things are absolutely necessary to get us through certain experiences. And I think for people like me, people like you, we've recognized that we also have come to these points in life where our values start to change. We're also living in a world right now where you and I are not sent out to go engage in violence, right?
Not anymore. No.
Thankfully, we have that luxury. Some people are still living in that world in the U.S. in different places, different neighborhoods, and in the service. But a lot of us, and I work for the VA, people who are done with their service. So for the most part, most of us could start settling down here and make this a calmer experience, but we're stuck at these high intensities still, maybe. So, and when I talk about intensity, let's go back to the words I used: ambition, resilience, and toughness. Dude, they've got you a long way in life and got you to accomplish a lot of things, and me too. But what's involved with ambition and toughness? And I think the word resilience too, at least is how I've read about it, and I keep hearing people talk about it. Resilience is oftentimes synonymous with compartmentalization. Push that stuff down, tuck that stuff away, be tough, work through it. You can do it. But the problem with that is we come to different points in life where we've kind of reached this point of our values change, I guess. And what comes back around then is this emotional suppression, because we're so used to achieving, succeeding, moving forward, overcoming, competing. And I'll tell you what, man, I don't know if we've talked about this, but Michael Jordan there's that 10-part series called The Last Dance, I think, that came out a couple of years ago. I watched it, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I saw him, and I thought he was just the most awesome athlete, basketball player ever. I wouldn't say he was a hero of mine, but I just was in awe of him. I watched that 10-part series, and I'm still just as in awe of him, but I watch him talk as an older man now. And so there's part of me that's like sees him as, ooh, he still seems to hold on to some some of this drive to be competitive, to overcome, to achieve, to beat the opponent. And man, that it's what I see all the time. Like this drive to overcome and to put it behind us is part of post-traumatic stress,
Mm-hmm.
and it's conscious and it's subconscious. And that goes back to the type of people I'm working with, which is combat veterans, accident victims, and people who were sexually assaulted. I'll give I know I said a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, man. Again, I could go a lot of different directions with this, but let me just address some of the things you said. I totally, as you know, I completely agree on the kind of toughness, resilience, all of that. I think for most of my life, I was taught essentially that's the answer. That is the answer to all your problems is just go faster, go harder, suck it up. And it is an answer at times. Like we need that skill. I'm not dismissive of it. Like special operations, you need that. And there's people out there that don't have it. And I think they do need to find that for themselves. And that's important. But what's funny is the more like when I'm working with something like ChatGPT or some AI and I'm writing about mental fitness and it'll like not autocorrect it, but it'll like, if I'm like, hey, kind of help me reword this, it'll change it to mental toughness, mental strength. And I'm like, no, that's not, it'll literally use those terms because that's the common terminology. Yeah. And to me, it is like when we think of physical fitness and if you said it's strength, you'd be like, no, it's strength and agility and flexibility and endurance and, it's all of these things. So the same thing is true with mental fitness. It's like, it's not just mental toughness. Like that's just one piece of it, right? Like you need all of these other things. I'm curious on how you think, well, let me go back to like people that are coming into I still want to get back to, are people aware of this at all when they come into your office and talk to you for the most part? Do they know? Are they just like, I feel like, what are they saying? It's like, I feel this, I don't feel this, I don't feel anything, I'm blowing up at people. Like, what is it? Or all of the above?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I can't generalize everybody into one thing, but I hear that a lot. And the reason why I wanted to bring this topic here when you first contacted me about this is I've been doing a bunch of couple sessions lately. And for people who are now on with their lives and for people who maybe have a family or working towards a family or working on lasting relationships with an intimate partner, this topic is so important, especially for people who have toughness ingrained in them and emotional repression or suppression or emotional avoidance ingrained in them. So I have a lot of people come into my office. Dude, I'll share this. I had a guy from your community, from the SEAL community, come in over the last year. And in the first session, he said, and he's a veteran of that community and combat tours. The first session, he said, towards his marriage, he says, I remember this. He said, I want to come up with some strategies and some other word. But as soon as he said that, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be like
tactics.
The
work. Like, can I come up with tactics, right?
Yeah. And he's talking about his marriage, which from what I understood was not in a good place. And this was crushing him and his partner and the kids too. And it's like, gosh, how do I change this whole perspective and broaden his understanding? Well, I'll tell you what, dude, 3 sessions later, I thought I was doing a pretty good job, and he walked out and told me he wasn't going to come back. He was not happy with what was going on. And so that's one example of something that I see, but I'm sure you can relate to that. And we're talking, this is put on by Navy SEAL Foundation. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are in that community and around it, whether it's, wives, partners, kids, former operators who will nod their head and say, yeah, I can see that.
So wait, I'm curious on this though. Like he was uncomfortable with what was being like what made him walk out?
And I think I don't know exactly, but I think what you said is a big part of it. Like, we're not going to solve this problem. We're not going to solve your wife and how she interacts with you. That is not what this can be. First off, she's not here. Second off, that's unethical and inappropriate and just avoiding. And this is what I'm getting to. We are avoiding the challenge, which in the office, the challenge was this man who was sitting in front of me and his habits and his approach and all the experience he had and all the successes he had and all the achievements he had were not working in a marriage. And this is the problem. So maybe he didn't want to, maybe he didn't understand it, but both of those things can happen on a conscious and a subconscious level. Maybe some part of him just said no, and he wasn't explaining to me why he was walking out. So I'm guessing that all this stuff inside of him, internal to him, was just like, no, doesn't make sense, doesn't compute, can't work, not willing, and some words were shared from him towards me at that moment, even though I'm trying to build rapport and trying to open up conversations about how does a marriage and a relationship work? Tell me about yours,
Wow.
Yeah. And so
it's got to be tough.
And that's
you.
not, yeah, that was not a fun moment. I want to help the guy. And that doesn't happen frequently. Most people who come into our offices are curious, and some of them know a lot. I too, there's a lot of people who come in who can quote the DSM-5, which is the book with all the psychiatric disorders in it, like literally. And they've gone to weekend retreats and read all the books and read The Body Keeps the Score twice. And they know all the words. They know more words than I know about in psychology. Sometimes I'm like, wait, what did you say? What does that mean? Oh yeah, I remember that from grad school. Yeah. But they don't live it. And that now we're getting back to the whole intellectual cognitive side versus the emotional side, and how do we start to live both?
So where do you start with these folks, right? So someone comes in and it's clearly we need to open the emotional aperture, expand the emotional bandwidth, whatever you want to call that there. Where do you start with them? What are you telling them to do?
Yeah, it depends on the person and their understanding, and it depends on what they want to talk about too. But I think one thing that has to be acknowledged is the concept of being emotionally dismissive. That's a big one. If you look at, I'm gonna check my notes here. I had to look this up again. Attachment styles. Have you ever heard of attachment styles and gotten into that?
No.
It's this theory that's really interesting in relationships. So I'm trying to kind of keep this discussion towards relationships. I know this is an important topic for all of us human beings if we're trying to live our healthiest lives. So attachment styles, which it's sort of like how we interact and respond in our most intimate, vulnerable relationships. Not necessarily with some coworker that you hardly ever talk to, or some guy who's at the shop down the street. I'm talking people who know us, who know how we operate, where they know what makes us tick, what makes us hurt, what makes us happy, right? There's a lot of vulnerability there. So there's 4 attachment styles, and I want to talk about 2 of them here. The 2 that I don't need to talk about necessarily are fearful and avoidant, sometimes called disorganized. It's just where it's codependence is associated with this, where there's this like drive, like, I need you to love me. Please don't be angry at me. Please don't leave me. That kind of stuff, right? And then there's another one called anxious preoccupied, which is kind of a less severe version of that. But the one that is so problematic in so many military veteran related relationships is this dismissive avoidant relationship. When partner says something that turns the knife in us a little bit, it's so easy to just say, well, curse word, that, turn our shoulder, right? Happens all the time in relationships across humanity, and how damaging that is to closeness, to intimacy, to happiness, to satisfying experiences with our partner.
But are we doing that because that's what we do with ourselves? Do you know what I mean? Is that like the fact that we're used to, okay, I'm going to essentially ignore my emotions. I'm going to ignore this data stream, right? 50% of the data. I'm just going to brush it aside. I do that with myself. Is that then carry over to other things, to a relationship? Is that what's going on there?
Yeah. I mean, you went through buds, how much physical pain, and there's emotional pain in there too. Why are these dudes making us do this again? How come I'm last? All that kind of stuff. Did you sit and process it and let some tears out and express it like you have already validated as such a healthy thing to do? No, F that.
Yeah.
That's not how we're doing this.
No.
We are shutting that down, pressing it down, and pushing forward. I'm not willing to feel that stuff. It's such a part of many of our lives.
Do you find if you ask people how they feel, do they have trouble articulating that?
A lot of people do. Yeah. I would say the most when I'm a really common response when I ask questions like that is they will tell me the events of their day. When I ask them how you've been doing, I start almost every session as soon as they sit on the couch. How you been doing? How's it going? And it's, of course, it's a psychotherapy session, so you can go as deep as you want. That's what I hope you do. But I have this medical appointment. It looks like this, and then like dog pissed me off, and then like the driving and money. Like that's just not at all what I asked. I asked, how are you doing? And sometimes just repeating the question, people often light up and say, oh, I see what I did there.
But even then, do they struggle with it? Do people have trouble tapping into that? Like, right? Yeah. Like if we lost the ability to do that over time is kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah. I'll give another anecdotal example that might shed some light on this. I was with a guy on Tuesday, and he is still active. And every time I meet with him, he wants to talk about how all the absurdities in the leadership in his organization and the people who are under him, and the stuff that drives him crazy. It's this real negative mindset. And on Tuesday, I heard him for the first time talk about what I think he has some understanding of why he does that. He was a Marine, and he's still is, and he was a mission in Iraq, and he yelled at some young Marine, called him all by a bunch of names, sent him on a mission, and that young Marine's truck got hit and blew up, and he died. So all this guilt, all this all this grief that has not been processed, has not been allowed to be felt, is stuck down there as frustration, anger, and I guess all this negativity. I guess that's how it works in the world. You shouldn't, I'm a screw up and they're a screw up, and we're just going to be angry about it. And look at that. What I'm talking about, emotional spectrum, anger. That's like all he gives. It's for months. That's all I'm seeing from him is I'm angry about this and this person, and then they suck and everything sucks, and politics suck and everything, everything. And it's just like, do we got anything more than this? Like, he's married. Like, what about you and your wife? Well, she thinks I'm a this, and I'm just going to avoid that topic this weekend. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. We all do that kind of thing to some degree in our lives sometimes.
I mean, this is one of these things that I find all the time this is why I talk about anger and sadness being these two suppressed emotions that are like two sides of a coin, because in my experience, it's like if you're suppressing one more than the other, you overcompensate the other way, right? So it's like if you spend a lifetime of suppressing sadness, you essentially overcompensate with anger, because it's like a way to sort of move that energy, right? And you're more comfortable with it. Like as a guy, it's a lot of times it's like, I can't cry, but it's cool to scream, right? Like I yell and that's cool. And then there's a lot of people that are the other way, where it's like, you have to be proper, and that's not, whatever. You have to like maintain composure and all that stuff. So they like go cry themselves in a corner, like at the end of the day or whatever, right? Like that kind of thing. And it's funny. I actually it's just to finish this thought. Like I actually was kind of working with a dude or a group of dudes, but this guy was like, when I was talking about this, he was like, if I drink too much, I end up getting really angry and screaming, and then I'll end up crying a whole bunch. And he's like, does that make sense? And I'm like, yeah, it totally makes sense, man. Like that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like, those things are kind of intertwined in there.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about anger a lot, and how it is oftentimes an umbrella or a covering or a secondary emotion to other things that are going on. But I work with this other counselor who served in the Marines, and he always makes this comment. And all the guys who come to group and the women who come to group laugh at this. He says, what are the only acceptable emotions in the military? Anger and teasing each other, which often about their anger or it results in more anger. Like that's it. Like that's what our, right. In my words, that's what the emotional spectrum kind of was in many ways, not in every case, but that's so necessary to survive in violent areas. We're talking, when we go back to like, post-traumatic stress and survival responses, right? And how the brain responds and the body responds. And there's not a lot of emotional spectrum going on when we've experienced that to an intense levels.
So again, like where are you starting with, someone listening to this who's like resonating and they're nodding up their head up and down. They're going, yep, right. Or maybe they're not, but they're thinking, I'm feeling this. Where do you start with people? Like, someone who's willing to be like, okay, I see this. I can understand what you're talking about. What do you have them do? Are they doing exercises? Are they meditating to start? Are they finding something to make themselves cry? What are they doing?
Yeah, for me, and I think every person who does this work can approach it differently and with similar success. But for me, it's really important to get the people I meet with just to talk through their stuff. And the more they talk through it, the more they hear themselves, the more I can reflect things back to them. There's another guy I met with more than 20 years in the Army, several combat tours. And I just needed him to like talk about the event where one of his friends was killed on a convoy in Afghanistan. And there was just he wouldn't talk about it. But I could see he had a tattoo with the guy's name. He mentioned the guy's name once, and I'm like, I see that on his forearm. So this is obviously a deeply important thing. Yeah. And finally, he just started, the more he talked through it, session after session, you could see tears were about to well up. And then, we call that out. One thing that's really, I wouldn't say fun, but so satisfying and meaningful in the work that I'm doing is we cut through the bullshit. And it's so much fun to do that. It's so rewarding and beautiful to just call out what's going on. It looks like you're trying to hold back tears. And I have to develop trust with people to get to that point.
Yeah.
Why are there tears here? Which is an obvious question. And once they start answering it, it becomes more real to them. Now, I think in that case, he's starting to see this emotional spectrum become something could be a little bit wider. Unfortunately, if we're talking about trauma therapy, which is predominantly what I do, there's going to be a lot of the negative stuff that comes out. And that's one reason why we don't revisit this stuff, because I don't want to feel that stuff. I'm going to use alcohol, marijuana, whatever, to push that stuff down so I can feel this something else. I'd rather just feel mellowed out. It's why we sometimes go to work and become workaholics, right? And ambition and drive. It's probably not a secret in our culture. Some of the most successful people came from childhoods where they were not validated or given much, and they just had to just fight. God dang it, I'm going to get through this. And I know I'm saying a lot of stuff here, and your question was, how do we start? It's a lot of different ways, but people have to bring it. It's never a program that we're selling. It's never the 5 steps toward emotional healing. At least I haven't seen a book that covers everything there. This has to just be the experience of sitting with another human being who can sit with it and handle it. That can be so powerful. It's what we do in friendships, right? It's what we do in relationships. Yeah. We sit down and share that stuff with each other. That's where, in my life, and you've told me sometimes in your life too, that is the goal. That's why we have friendships. That's when some real changes and healing can start to happen, when I can be all these things. I want to add one more thing too.
Yeah.
I think one of the most beautiful moments in therapy, especially with sexual assault survivors, is when they start to tell the story in what either minimal detail or a lot of detail, but they're starting to cry about it, and their voice raises, and there's tears, and there's serious pain in the room going on. And we go in through enough of that to the point where I feel like I can point something out and make a little joke, like I did last week with a young woman. You just went through my whole tissue box. She did. She went through the whole box in one session. And she just kind of had this little giggle, like, yeah. And then I laughed a little bit harder, and then she laughed a little bit harder. Now, what we're doing in that moment, that's I get very passionate about this. I start swearing a lot. But that's the effing whole thing, man. That is the emotional spectrum of us. The really difficult, painful stuff, coming around through all the different things related to that, to also some levity. And, oh my God, I'm okay talking through this thing.
Yeah. The crying thing, I reflect, as you were talking through that, I was just thinking about, you and I have had conversations actually about things that have made us spontaneously shed tears, and our analysis of that, whether it's a song or a picture or something like that. And man, I will say, in part, this came to light for me in such a stark way where I think it was just sitting at home, and it was like, a song or whatever it was, by myself. And and it was like there was something triggering in there where it was like, this makes me want to cry. And my instinct was to not do it. And I'm like, and I but at least I had done enough work at that point where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I am by myself. There's nothing to be embarrassed about here. But we still, I guess my point with that is, like, we can get to the point where it's so that I don't want to say, actually, instinct's the wrong word, because it's not really instinctual. It's a habit that we've developed to push that down, has become so ingrained in us.
It becomes an impulse.
Yeah, an impulse. That's a good word. That, again, I can understand being in a crowd of strangers or being in a public place. I get that, right? Like, I get the potential embarrassment there, where it's like, hey, I don't, and I've been there too, like in a movie theater where I was like, I got to get out of here. And, but if we are so engaged in suppression and so dysregulated that, like, we're not willing to let that go on our own, like, that awareness, it was just a big thing for me, where I was like, oh my God, I have to get over this and just let this go here. Like, this is important. This is healthy. This is necessary in this moment.
You have that awareness. And maybe you have the awareness now, not just subconscious, but very conscious, that this also provides me some relief. This is going to be good for me.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a lot of us that do not have that awareness or accepting that truth. It's a truth.
Do you also like talk about, right? Because again, going back to kind of the energetic health component of this, like, I think other things that have helped me, that I think can help, is just getting more in touch with the energy of your body and trying to get it to move better in general. So whether that's breath work or qigong, or just something where you're not constricting and you're feeling the energy of your body in a better way, right? So is that anything you ever talk about or have people do?
Yeah, it is. But like I said before, the mission, the job that I'm in is talk therapy. That's what we exist for. We also do a lot of activity therapy. One thing that's really interesting, because we're here in San Diego, we've got ocean and surfing. There's this nonprofit that helps with, they put on a surf clinic, and actually the VA hospital helps with that.
What nonprofit is
that? There's Challenge Athletes Foundation and Jimmy Miller.
Okay.
Jimmy Miller Foundation.
Okay.
So one of my favorite things to do, which I find really beautiful, is to bring people who have so much anxiety. And I'm thinking of a woman who's like 35 years old, who's served in the Navy, who was raped, and a man who served in the Army combat tours in Iraq, who was raped as a kid.
Oh, wow.
When I take them out to invite them to surf clinic, and they come, for the first half an hour, we sit around a circle and there's somebody leading a discussion, and it's cool, and you can participate or not. But when you put on the wetsuit and it's February, you know where I'm going with this with water temperature, right? And you get in the water and you freeze up and your whole body responds, and you're out of you can't control it. You're accepting that you have to accept this loss of control, or you're going to stand there like a frozen statue with all this tension, and you're eventually just going to topple over, right? You have to keep moving through it. And then when they get out there with surf instructors and they just play in the white water, they're not going out to the big waves, but it comes in, anybody who's been to the ocean before knows how you will get knocked over, and it's like takes a lot of energy. And so when people trying to get on a board and just catch a wave, even if they're just on their stomach, and they flip over and get toppled, and the water makes them somersault, and it's freezing, and it's like, and they come up, and there's snot coming out of their, their hair's all over the place. I love it because I get to go over that and say, I bet you're not depressed right now.
Yeah.
I bet you are not anxious about anything right now. And it really, I think with those two people I mentioned, it really stuck with them. And it's a really, really cool moment to have with people because it's such a lesson. They're finally learning about their whole system.
Yeah.
And I find it's a lot easier now to have healing, productive talk psychotherapy with them from that moment on. There's just a little bit the tightness, the emotional tightness. I got to keep it in this tight little line right here. Starts to loosen a little bit because they're embarrassed, they're in pain, they're uncomfortable, they're shocked. What the hell just happened? Is this supposed to be fun? So,
a couple last things here on that. The first is based on just what you're saying. Like, I bet you're not anxious right now. That was such an important learning for me from a chronic illness perspective, where it was so much of what I was experiencing was tied to my mind, because I learned this there's a guy, Ashok Gupta, who's got a thing called the Gupta program, which is it's a neural retraining system. I don't know if you know who he is, but it's limbic system. It's amygdala retraining, basically, right? So it's calming your amygdala down, because you end up with all these symptoms from just this overactive fight or flight response. And his point was, however bad off you are in this, I bet there are pieces of time, even for 5 seconds every day, where you don't feel this way. And what that should tell you is you're not like, there's nothing materially broken with you. There's not like a physical defect, right? Getting back to your thing about it not being like data type of thing. If you break your arm, it's broken all the time, and it slowly gets better and heals. But with the mental stuff and the chronic illness stuff that can be a byproduct of that, it can be really bad and then you're okay, and then really bad and you're okay, which is like a real clear indicator that you're dealing with a software issue, right? It is an energetic issue, not a hardware thing. Yeah. And that was such a great insight for me, because it made me realize, like, the worst times, it's like this at some point is going to go away, and all I have to work on, if nothing else, is increasing the amount of time that it's not here, right? Like, that's a victory. It's like, if 90% of your day you're super anxious or whatever, and 10% of your day you're okay, see if you can get it to 80-20 or 85-15, and then see if you can get it to 75-25, right? Like, you know what I mean?
That's it. I bring that up all the time. That's how it works. I think that's how it's worked for me.
Me too.
That's how it works for a lot of people. And once again, it's interesting here. This stuff we're talking about is so very important and so very real and so very healing. Yet I don't know that the psychological community, the leading authors are able to really put all this stuff into language yet. And I'm not either, in a way. And I think, coming around to our emotional world is so important to validate and to experience. And I want to kind of maybe finish with this concept and just see if you have any thoughts, or let it sit. I have this theory, and it's come from just the work I've done. It's not fully defined or fleshed out yet, but I have this theory that when we are kind of locked down in a certain emotional stage or part of the spectrum, I use the word aperture a lot. I think you have to open the aperture. But when you do that, and there's people I've worked with who were snipers who this makes a lot of sense. If you open up the aperture and see all the stuff that's going on, there's a woman, there's a kid there. I don't know who this person is near. Right. There's all this other stuff going on. When we open up our emotional aperture and become more healthy, wholesome people, all the shit's got to come, has to be acknowledged and experienced for us to get to the real joy, the satisfaction, the laughter, the meaning, being able to sleep at night amidst all of it. You know what I'm getting at? I'm kind of talking whole health, which is a concept that the VA is starting to work with people on too. I don't know if this is grounded in, the technology of human existence yet, but I just have this sense with so many people, like we have to go through the bad stuff. You have to talk about, you have to grieve it if this is going to improve.
So let's wrap with this. And it's a perfect tie into what you just said, which is the other piece of this that I've come to realize is the word intuition. And it's like the leading edge of this thing. And because you just said, it's just something I have a sense about, right? And this is something that I think, again, getting back to the empiricism that I tend to operate with, I think I at some point dismiss it as that's bullshit, right? That's not a thing at all. And don't get me wrong, your intuition can be wrong, right? Like it's not 100% right all the time, but there's something there. And it gets back to like, how do you feel about it? Not how do you think about it? How do you feel about it? And I kind of learned this from a guy that I kind of did some retreat stuff with. I've talked about him before, who's very intuitive, and he kind of really leans into that. And I think you can go too far that way too. You can be like, I'm not going to look at the data or anything. I'm just going to go on gut instinct or whatever. And that can be a problem. But I've heard people like saying, if you're leading with your gut, you're not leading, or something like, something like that. And I'm sort of like, no, at this point, I disagree with that. I think it's a data source. It's information that you should pay attention to.
It's information.
Yes.
It's informative.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of all of this. To me, it's like the leading edge of the emotional component, or whatever you want to call it, right? It's like, and getting in tune with that again, I think has been really important for me to be like, okay, how do I feel about this? And acknowledge that and go, okay. Yeah. And maybe sometimes I go, that's not right. Like, the data really suggests otherwise, whatever the, hypothetical scenario is here.
And but Chris, think about how important that is, how crucial that is in intimate relationships and marriages, to let the other person know, hey, what you said there, like, feels like really dismissive, feels like you don't kind of care. I don't like that. That hurts, right? That is the way to getting through these moments where hurtful things are said, rather than drawing apart, turning a cold shoulder. Whatever, it doesn't bother me. I don't care. I care less than you. Okay, I care less than you. I care less than you. Sure. This isn't such an important topic, not just in our own individual experience, but as you raise kids, as you interact with coworkers, employees, bosses, acknowledging this stuff wherever it's appropriate, of course. But this is a hard thing to do in our culture. Yeah. It's hard we're not taught how to do this well. We're not even taught the value of doing this oftentimes, a lot of us. Yeah.
Let's end it there, dude. This was awesome. I really appreciate it, man. And hopefully we can keep this going, whatever the cadence looks like. I don't know, but I think there's a lot to talk about in this, and I appreciate your perspective and your expertise. And I think honestly, the very open and honest insight into real life scenarios too, I just think is fantastic, because I guarantee there are people out there that those stories resonate with, and they see themselves in part or in whole with what those folks are going through. And even just knowing that they're not alone, I think is really, really important. Mm-hmm. So
good. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to share some of this stuff, because I hope people I hope it resonates with people and leads to good things.
For sure. Cool. Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an Ironclad original series sponsored by Mechanics Wear. Learn more at NavySealFoundation.org or text on the X to 60104. Please like, share, subscribe, and if you have a question or feedback, drop it in the comments. See you next time.